Hi, I'm Rhonda, and welcome to Calvary Church. We are so excited that you've decided to join us today, and we want to take a chance to get to know a little bit more about you as well. So I encourage you to please fill out the Connect card, either in our app or on our website at calvary.church/Connect card. From there, you can let us know where you're watching from and if you might be interested in learning a little bit more about any of our ministries. Calvary's vision is to be a community of Christ followers who love God, change lives, and transform communities in our homes, in our cities, truly all over the world. Go to calvary.church/missions to find out more about what we're doing, and we want to invite you to join us as we reach the world. We have prayer teams you can serve on, mission trips all over the globe. So if you'd like to take a next step in missions, make a note on your Connect card and we will be in contact with you this week. Well, that's all for now. Service is about to begin, so please go forth and get ready to learn about the Lord in a whole new way.
Just stand to your feet with us today. We're going to celebrate Jesus and just express our gratitude to him today. Come on, let's sing.
My feet on higher ground. So here I stand. You are my God. Your faithfulness, my solid rock. Come on, sing this out. I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done.
We're delighted that you're here. If it's your first time with us, well, welcome home. You're invited to join us at the big desk afterwards to learn more about Calvary and to get a free gift. When you came in, you got the Connect card. If you could complete the bottom part, and then when the ushers come around later, you can put it in the offering basket, we'd appreciate that. All right, show of hands, how many of you already have a Christmas tree up in your house? There's a few up there, but not as many as I thought. In fact, I think we have the same amount here as we did last night. There weren't as many people last night. Oh, secretly, I wish that I did, but I don't. But I'm really excited about the Christmas season coming up here at Calvary. It's my first on staff as the Women's Ministry Director, and we have a special event that I want to invite all the women to. It's the Ladies' Dessert Gala on December 10th. It's a wonderful night, yes, as I know it's annual tradition for many people. It's a wonderful night of an inspirational message, beautifully decorated tables, delicious desserts, and just a fun night with friends new and old. We have these invitations available at the big desk for you to grab a stack and hand them out to your neighbors, your friends, family, coworkers. Invite them to come and join you. You can register online at calvary.church/events to attend or to be a table hostess. And this week, I invited our Connect drop-in speaker to the gala, and she was overjoyed by the invitation because she's between churches and doesn't really have somewhere to celebrate Jesus' birth this Christmas. So she was really excited to attend, also because it's free. That was exciting for her, and childcare is only $5 per family, and she's got 3 little kiddos. So she thought that was a great deal. So she's looking forward to coming. I hope you will too. Invite your friends, mark your calendar for December 10th. And now will you join us as we continue to worship a God who has the power to overcome all of our fears.
Tries to roll over my bones, and sorrow comes to steal the joy I have. stand a chance when I stand in your love, and my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. When I'm standing in your love, no, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love, and my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love, and my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. I'm standing on the rock. Yes, I'm standing in your love.
Why don't you go ahead and take a seat for just a minute? The ushers are preparing to distribute the elements for communion, and as they do that, why don't we just take time together as we sing this song called Give Me Jesus, to steady our hearts, to focus our minds around the truth that Jesus is all we need, and that's because the work that he did accomplished everything that we possibly could ever imagine, right? Any iniquity, any sin has been covered by his blood and his broken body. And so let's just continue to celebrate together as we sing.
Give me Jesus in the good and in the bad, in the seasons where my strength is at a stand, even when it's easy and I feel your sovereign hand. I will gladly lift my voice again.
Ushers, you may come.
Give me Jesus when I'm lost and insecure, in my sanity and when I can't endure. You conquer in my darkness, and the night will surely end, and I will sing a song of thankfulness. And with all my heart and with all my strength, I will enter into your courts with praise, and let all that is within me sing. Give me Jesus again. Give me Jesus in the famine and the rain. In my weakness, Lord, your promise will remain, and I will feel the love that's pouring from your veins, and I will gladly lift my voice again. And with all my heart and with all my strength, I will enter to your courts with praise, and let all that is within me sing. Give me Jesus again. Oh, and with all my heart and with all my strength, I will enter to your courts with praise, and let all that is within me sing. Give me Jesus
Before Jesus went to the cross, he said, I want you, when you gather together, just to share a very simple meal, and to let it just be a reminder that your soul is going to crave for so many other things, and you're going to long for some sort of peace or joy or fulfillment or satisfaction. And that can only be found in a relationship with him. And Jesus, he took bread and he broke it, and he said, this is a symbol of my body. It's broken for you. He'd already described himself as the bread of life, the one that we can feast on, the one who satisfies. And when we gather together and we share this meal, we're reminded that nothing else really satisfies but him. He broke it, he gave thanks, and let's eat together. And Jesus took a cup and he said, you know, this is a symbol of just my love for you. It's a symbol of my blood that's going to be poured out, but that's the love demonstrated on the cross. And that there is power in this cup. There is forgiveness in this cup. There is a future in this cup. We look for so many other things to cover our guilt and shame and cover our vulnerability. And Jesus says, let it be me. That I gave my life on the cross for you. He took a cup and he gave thanks, and let's drink together. Our Heavenly Father, I'm sure many times this week we've said, just give me a little bit more of this, or give me a little of that, or give me enough of this, give me some peace, give me some rest, give me strength. And Lord, we long for so many other things just to fill us, but may we be reminded that that filling is only in Jesus, that the one who completely satisfies is you. There's just taken a moment to reflect that you are the bread of life, the one who sustains. You are the forgiver of life, the one who demonstrated their love for us. Lord, may we come back again and again and again to you to be the one who fulfills and satisfies. I invite us just to stand and worship together on who Jesus is. He is enough.
Endless fountains, bread of heaven, give me Jesus again.
always faithful to renew his mercies, to extend grace to his people. So we ask for that today, that we would have open ears and minds to hear what you have for us, God. But we love you, we praise you. That's why we're here today. That's why we worship. God, it's in your precious and holy name that we pray. Amen. Amen. Hey, before you're seated, why don't you turn and greet somebody around you? And then veterans, if you would remain standing, we want to recognize you for a moment.
Well, let's see all our veterans here. Let's celebrate them. Would you all stay standing? What a great crew of people. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. We appreciate you. Really, you should be seated and we should be standing to honor you. Thank you for what you do. We have a special ministry to veterans called Welcome Home. You can find out a little bit more about that in the lobby, so make sure you stop by there as well and say thank you to these men and women who have really given their lives and who have risked so much for our freedom. Anybody know what this is? A Happy Meal. This is the most misnamed product on the planet. 56 Fusion, you can leave. You can go have your own Happy Meal with what you're doing. We thank you for you. This is a misnamed product because it never, ever really delivers the happiness it promises. When my kids were little, we would be in this named restaurant, and we would be there at the counter and say, hey, kids, what do you want? And they would always say, we want a Happy Meal. And I'm like, I know I'm going to pay for a soggy hamburger, a few fries, and an overpriced toy. And I said, why don't I just get you some hamburgers and fries, and then I'll give you a quarter or something. You can go buy your own toy. No, Dad, we need a Happy Meal. The only way we will ever really be happy is if we have a Happy Meal. This, the toy inside, it's what will give us happiness. And I'm thinking, no, it won't. And it's going to cost me something. And we're arguing about the Happy Meal. And then everybody in the restaurant's leaning over, looking at the cheapskate dad who won't give their kids a Happy Meal. And so finally I give in. And they sit down, they eat the hamburger, part of it. They eat all the fries because they are pretty good. And they open up the package and they get out the toy, and then it's, oh, Dad, we already had that one. Dad, this is a boy's toy, not a girl's toy. Dad, I can't get it open. Or it doesn't really do anything. And after about 30 seconds, they're off playing somewhere, and the happiness is completely gone. And herein is the lie of the Happy Meal. It promises something it will never deliver. And yet the next time we go to McDonald's, what do they say? I want a Happy Meal. It's not going to make you happy, but I need a Happy Meal. And the next time we go, I need a Happy Meal. Now, my girls are of an age, they're not necessarily wanting a Happy Meal. They don't want the toy. But our desires and things that make us happy, they just increase. Right? We live with this idea that one more thing, a little bit more, a little extra, then I will finally be happy. Do you know, 1960, the average size house that was built was 1,300 square feet. Today, the average size house that's being built, do you know how big it is? 2,600 square feet, twice as much. It's twice as big. Is our happiness twice as big? And guess what? In those 60 years or so, that the number of storage units has increased 20 times. Our houses are twice as big as what they used to be, but they're still not big enough because we need to rent storage units for our stuff. And yet we're still not what? Happy. The average muffin in 1960, it was 1.5 ounces, about 100 calories. The average muffin today, do you know how big it is? 5 ounces, about 4 times as big, 500 calories, and does it make us any happier? The desire for more, the lie that just a little bit more, that I am not content with what I have, but a little bit more, something else, it will make me happy, leads us to all sorts of destructive things. The Apostle Paul writes about that in 1 Timothy chapter 6. He's writing to a pastor there, and in verse 6, he says, but godliness with what? Contentment. Can you say that? Godliness with contentment is what? Great gain. That's a win. That's a bonus. You've got good, righteous character. God's there with you. And you have what? Contentment. Man, that's a win in life. Right? You wonder sometimes, what would it be like to be content? To not want a little bit more, to not be unsatisfied with what you have. He said, for we brought nothing into this world and we take nothing out of it. But if we have what? Food and clothes, we will be content with that. Now that's probably the most countercultural verse in the Bible. Right? How many of us say, I just need some food and clothes? I just need a little bit. Here's the Apostle Paul. He says, look, if you just have some food and some clothes, like you should be what? Happy and content with that. The problem is we want more. Food and clothes isn't enough. Or the kind of food we want isn't enough. Or we have to have newer clothes, better clothes, more modern clothes, clothes that are more flattering. We need something different. So the Apostle Paul goes on, he says, people who want to what? Get rich. People who are not content, people who are not satisfied, they fall into what? Temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men, what? Into ruin and destruction. It says people who want more, aren't content and satisfied with what they have, what? Fall into a temptation, a trap, foolish and harmful, what? Desires, and plunge us into temptation and destruction. For what? The love of money. Now notice he doesn't say money, because money is neutral. Money in itself is neither good nor evil. But the love of money, the want of it, the discontent with what we have, the desire to need more. I'm not quite satisfied. One little thing, a Happy Meal will make me happy. He says, what is the root of all evil? And some people, eager for money, have wandered from faith and what? Pierced themselves with many griefs. And here the Apostle Paul, he's saying our quest for another Happy Meal, a different Happy Meal, just a little bit more, something, a little toy, a little extra, our quest for that will make us happy has what? Pierced our souls and plunged us into many griefs. And some of you know that. The quest for contentment, the quest for a little bit more has caused us to do some crazy things. You know people who married the wrong person just because they wanted a comfortable life. I mean, you deal with the consequences of that. Many of you regret never having kids because you're afraid you'd have an uncomfortable life. Many of you chose a job because of what it would pay and you do not enjoy it instead of something that you really want to do. Some of you are in families completely fractured because of the love of money and the quest for an inheritance or wanting something more or stealing something money. Or steal someone's money. You know the pain of that. That for the love of money and the desire for more and never ever being satisfied and the lie that one more Happy Meal will make us happy has plunged us into destruction. And Solomon in the Old Testament, he writes this. This is the worst of them all. He says that what it has done is it causes sometimes to go into debt, to have things we cannot afford. And in Proverbs 22, verse 7, Solomon says, just as the rich rule over the poor, so what? The borrower is servant to the lender. That here Solomon says God's desire for us, and when Israel entered the promised land, when God created Israel and called them to be a nation, he says, I don't want you to be borrowers. In fact, the blessing of God upon you as a nation is that people will come and borrow from you. You're not to be a slave to anyone but me. Why would you put yourself in a situation where you're beholding to someone else but me, where you are not free to serve me because you have to serve someone else, someone who holds power over you because you've borrowed from them? And here Solomon says the borrower is what? A slave to the lender. And we live in a culture of slavery. It's really fascinating, right, that we are in the richest country in the world, and yet we act like we are in the poorest of countries because we owe so much. Whereas we said last week, the average one of us has over $8,000 in credit card debt. If you pay just the minimum payment, which half of us carry a balance each month, right? More than half of us carry a balance. Less than half of us pay it off. If you just make the minimum payment, it will take you 20 years to pay that off. And you'll pay over $8,000, double the amount. Because of debt, not considering mortgage debt, because mortgage debt on at least a house, something that generally appreciates value, it isn't that foolish of a desire. But debt in our lives, 14% of our income per person goes to servicing debt. And we wonder why we are so stressed, wonder why there's so much conflict in marriage, wonder why we make foolish decisions, wondering why we aren't free. I'm not free to be generous. I'm not free to do what I want because I am a servant to the credit card company or the bank because they make it so easy. And last week we just started this short series. We've just called it Entrusted, looking at how do we deal with what God has entrusted with us. In just a few weeks, we're going to talk about stewarding our money and stuff and possessions. And we don't talk a lot about money here. We've never really done a whole sermon on money. So if this is your first time here, welcome. We always talk about this. But we're not just talking about giving or tithing or everything else. We're talking about what? Who are you a slave to? Who are you a slave to? And why are you a slave sometimes to stress? And why are you a slave to money? Because most of us, we would want to say, I want to sit here and I want to be what? Content. Because godliness with contentment is great gain. And the reason we pierce ourselves, the reason we get into debt, the reason that we become a slave to money and other things is because we listen to 3 lies. And that's what we just want to look at today. What are the 3 lies of kind of the happy meal? The 3 lies that make us do stupid things and make foolish financial decisions that end up piercing ourselves and often getting us in debt. The first lie is that we think just a little bit more will make us content. Isn't that the lie? I just need a little bit more. If I just have this, I will be content. If I just have the newest phone, if I just have the newest app, if I just get like a few more inches on my TV, if I just get this counter, if I just could have this stove, if I could just have this size house, if I could just have this job, if I could just have a little bit more salary, then I will what? Be content. That's the lie. That contentment is not something that we have. Contentment isn't not something that we give. Contentment is just a little bit more. Solomon writes about this. He says in Proverbs chapter 30, verse 7, he says, 2 things I ask of you, O Lord. Don't refuse me before I die. This is just what I want. Keep falsehood and lies from me. That's the first. And secondly, he says, give me neither poverty nor riches. But give me only what my daily bread. Otherwise, I might have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God. And here is what Solomon says. He's praying, hey, Lord, would you just make me content? Right, it's probably not a prayer that we pray. Like, just give me enough that I don't have to steal and dishonor you, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a position where I have to make some really, really difficult, ungodly decisions. But he says, don't give me too much. When was the last time you prayed that? Don't give me too much, Lord. Right, don't give me too much. Why? Because I'll forget about you. I won't trust you. Don't give me too much because I'm going to still make a foolish decision. Because if I get a little bit more, it's not going to be enough. And a little bit more, it's not going to be enough. Back about 50 years ago, there was a British sociologist, Isaac. He came up with this term. He called it the hedonistic treadmill. You know what a treadmill is? That you're running and running and you're going, but you never get anywhere, right? that you exert a whole lot of energy, but you never really go anywhere. And he called it the hedonistic treadmill. Hedonism is kind of pleasure, this false desire or deception that just one little more thing, a little bit more pleasure, it will make me happy. Right? Just give me the newest iPhone, and that will then be happy until next year when the new one comes out. Right? Just give me a little bit bigger TV, and then I'll be happy. Just give me a little newer car, then I'll be happy. And what he says, the problem is once we get something, the newness quickly wears off. And the pleasure that we get from it wears off. After a little while, it gets scratched, right? It slows down. The battery isn't as powerful. And the pleasure that you get from it wears off. And so it no longer brings you happiness. So you need something new to make you happy. And something different to make you happy. And just like a drug addict, right, needs a bigger high and a better high, or an alcoholic perhaps needs just a little bit more, right, or a shopaholic has to keep going. He says when it comes to pleasure and discontent, we always want something new because the effect of what we have wears off. And we buy into this lie, right, which the TV and social media tells us, you just have this and you'll be happy. You drink this, you eat this, you go here, you vacation there, you sleep in these sheets, and then you will be happy. And that's a lie. Paul says what? Godliness with contentment. That's gain. There's not a lot better. In fact, the Apostle Paul goes on in a couple places. He says something. He says, I have learned what it is to be content. I've learned. I've fought for it. I understand it. See, we buy into this lie. I will just slip into contentment with a little bit more. If I just have this, then I'll finally be content. And I will move into contentment. Paul says it's something we learn. It's something we battle. It's something we fight with. It's something that we have to have. It's not just going to happen. We are never going to wake up tomorrow and go, whoa, I'm just content. You may feel that first day of a vacation on a beach. Ooh, I'm really content. But the last day, you know what? I'm not content because I got to go back to reality. It doesn't last. And we have to understand what contentment is and what discontentment is. See, discontentment is pride. When we're discontent and we say, I'm not content because I don't have something, or if I just had a little bit more, I would be content. That's pride. That's saying, I know what is best for me. I know what I need. In fact, because of that discontentment, it's rebellion against God. When we are discontent, we are rebelling against a God who knows us, loves us, cares for us, who is called Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides for us. And when we say, God, you haven't provided what I need, and what you provide is not doing it for me, and I'm not happy or joyful because of that, we are then rebelling against our Father and saying, you're not good Father for me. The discontentment is pride, it's rebellion, and ultimately it's greed, right? The desire for just a little bit more. If I could just have this, then that will make me happy. That's greed. The problem is we can't see greed, right? Greed is blind. Gordon Gekko in the movies, he said, greed is good, right? We think greed is bad. Greed is really blind. That's what Jesus said. If you turn over to Matthew chapter 6, Jesus here in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 6, he talks about a lot of things. He talks about prayer, he talks about fasting, he talks about generosity and giving, and he talks here about money. And in Matthew chapter 6, he talks in particular about storing up treasure in heaven and storing up things in the future, thinking in eternity. He says, don't just get stuff here, think that's going to make you secure and significant. Store up treasure in heaven. Then after talking about storing up treasure in heaven, he says this that seems at first kind of out of sync. He says in verse 22 of Matthew 6, he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be what? Full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And Jesus here talks about money. Store up treasure in heaven. Don't get stuck on stuff here. And then he talks about our eyes. And at first you think, what is he saying? Because he says, if the light is good and your eyes are good, what's going to happen? You're going to be able to see well. But if your eyes are bad, if your eyes are blinded to things, it doesn't matter how much light you have, you're not going to be able to see clearly. He talks about money in verses 19 and 20. He talks about your eyes, and it goes on to talk about money. Why does he insert that? Because he wants us to understand that greed blinds us. We are blind to greed. And the reason we're often discontent is because we're greedy and we're blind to it. Now, let's be honest. How many times in your small group, in your home group, when you're in prayer for each other, how many times has someone ever said, hey, would you pray for me? I'm greedy. Did that ever happen in your group? I bet you said, hey, pray for me. I'm stressed. I bet you said, pray for me. I'm living in fear about something. You could say, hey, pray for me. I'm really dealing with some anger or hurt or bitterness with something else. Pray for me. I doubt very often do people ever say, hey, pray for me. What? Because I'm greedy. Why? Because we're blind to it. How many times at the end of the day, when you're kind of putting your head on the pillow and maybe you're just kind of surrendering the day to Jesus and you're talking about your day, how many times do you ever say, hey, Jesus, would you just forgive me? I've been a greedy person today. Right? We're blind to greed. And because we're blind to it, we live with this idea that just a little bit more, it will make me happy. See, the funny thing is we don't see ourselves as greedy because we're blind to it, right? We think the guy with the Lamborghini, they're greedy, right? The female with the designer dress, they're greedy. And funny enough, we always compare our greed quotient or level usually with people who are higher up than us, right, who have more than us. We never compare that to people who don't have as much as us. And yet we live in the 10% wealthy on the planet. We say, you got a car, you got a garage, like you've got some of those things, you got a bank account, you're in the 10% of the world's wealthiest population. Put 10 people in a line and you're in that line, you are probably one of the wealthiest. And we never compare ourselves to people who have little. We never say, well, yeah, I'm probably greedier than them. I'm just, I want like just the newest. I want the best. I want a little bit, like just a little. We justify it. Well, that will really make me happy. That will help me for work. That will just satisfy me. Greed is blind. We never ask, what does our greed do to somebody else? How does our greed affect people in the developing world? We never ask ourselves that. We ask ourselves, couldn't I have just a little bit more? Contentment. It comes when we stare down pride. When we say, I'm going to stop being rebellious against what my Father has given me, what he has entrusted to me. What he's entrusted to me is enough, and I'm going to be honest about the places that greed shows up in my life. That's the first lie. A little bit more will make me happy. The second lie is that we always ask the wrong question. The question we always ask often is, why don't I have enough? Right? Isn't that the question? Why don't I have enough? Instead of asking, why have I been entrusted with this? Right? Usually we look and we say, well, I could use a little bit more and I need a little bit more. And God, if I could just have a little bit more. And why don't I have enough? Why don't I have what will make me happy? If I just had a little bit more, why don't I have that so it will be happy? We keep asking that question. How would it be different if you said, why do I have what I have? Why has God entrusted this to me? What's the purpose of it? And you're probably sitting there and you're going like, hey, pastor, like, that's just a crazy question because you don't know my life. You don't know my debts. You don't know the things that are there. You don't know my expenses. You don't know what I have. I'm not asking why do I have what I have. I need more. And that's the problem. That we're never focused on what we have and what God calls us to do with it, and never focus on being good stewards of what he's entrusted with. We're like, why can't I have a little bit more? Doesn't God know my needs? Doesn't he know what's there? Instead of saying, hey, God, here's what I have. And Jesus tells a story about that. If you turn over in your Bibles to Luke chapter 12, verse 13, Jesus is teaching one day, and there's a guy asking that question. In verse 13, it says, someone in the crowd said to Jesus, teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. That ever happen? Someone's died in your family and there's kind of a little squabble over money, and people are asking what? Why don't I have more? Why can't I get more? I don't have enough, I want more. You shouldn't have more. I need more. Right? Because that's often the question. Why don't I have enough? Why don't I have more? Jesus replied, man, who appointed me judge or an arbiter between you? Then he said, watch out, be on guard against all kinds of greed. For a man's life doesn't consist, what? In the abundance of his possessions. And he told him this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. And he thought to himself, what should I do with it? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I'm going to tear down my barns, build bigger ones, and there I'm going to store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. So take it easy, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. And then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And this is how it will be for anyone who stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. And notice what Jesus says. The first thing he says, this guy, right, why don't I have enough? Why is someone taking something from me? Jesus says what? Watch out for all kinds of greed. Because we're blind to greed. No, it doesn't mean there shouldn't be justice and fairness. It doesn't mean people should steal from us. That's not right. But he says, watch out for all kinds of greed because we're blind to it. And there's some greed that seems to make us look good, some greed that looks justified. But watch out for it in your life because it's so subtle and we may never see it. And then he goes on to say, I mean, and this, again, is a countercultural statement we would have a hard time believing. He says, a person's life doesn't consist in what? A person's life doesn't consist in the abundance of their possessions. And we say it sure does. The value of my life is what I have. The quality of my life is what I have. It's in my zip code. It's in what I drive. It's in what I wear. It's in the technology I have, where I can vacation, what I do. The sum total of everything we work for and strive for and try to do. And all this in what? Our stuff. That's why we think just a little bit more stuff will make me feel a little better about myself. A little bit more stuff, as we saw last week, give me more security and more significance. The sum total of our life is in our stuff. And Jesus said, that's not the total of your life. Because there's going to be a day when you stand naked before God. And all that stuff you're not going to bring with you. What are you going to bring? The only thing we have to bring is our character and our relationships, the treasures we've stored in heaven. And then he says, to prove the point, he tells this story about a very successful farmer, business person. Has a piece of ground, grows crops, and it's just a really good piece of ground, and it just keeps growing abundant crops and abundant crops. And one day, he wakes up with a problem. We all wish we could have this problem. He's got too much. Right? How many of you wake up one day and said, man, my problem is I've got too much? Right? Don't we wish we had his problem? Right? This is kind of the person we aspire to be. This is who we want to be like. Because he's so successful and he's got so much. And as we're reading it, of course, we think what? We think, well, there's certainly things that you could do with that. That's a problem. You can put some away for the future. You can spend. You can give a lot away. Couldn't you invest in different ways? Invest in people. Be generous, but he doesn't think that. Why? Because he's not asking the question, what do I do with what God's entrusted to me? He's saying, why don't I have more? How can I get to a position where I have more? He's not saying, why has God given this to me? What's the purpose of it? He's saying, how can I order my life so I can have more? So he decides, here's what I'm going to do. Because his basement's full, right? His storage bins are full. He says, I'm going to build my business bigger. I'm going to create a situation where I can have more. And so he tears down even all his barns and his bins and everything else, and he builds new ones and bigger ones, and he fills them up. And we applaud him because this is who we all aspire to be. This is a person who has everything in store. He's worked all his life. He's been very successful, and he puts everything away for his retirement, and he says, now I can what? I can rest. I can eat, drink, and be merry, and I don't have to what? Worry. I don't have to trust about God. I don't even have to think about God. I don't even have to have faith in him. I don't even have to ask, why is he giving me this? Because it's enough. And this is the guy that we think he's a hero. He's the one we aspire to be. And what does God call him? See it in there? You might want to circle it. He says he's a fool. The person we aspire to be like is a fool. Why is he a fool? Because we think he planned for the future. Right? He stored things up. He was planning for his retirement. He's planning for everything. Why do we think he's a fool? Because he didn't plan far enough ahead. He didn't ask, why has God given me this? And God says, you fool, and what happened? That very night, right? He gets everything ready. That very night, he dies. He's gone. He doesn't get to use it at all. And he stands naked before God. And what's he got to show for his life? Instead of investing it in people, instead of investing in the kingdom, instead of investing in the future, instead of investing in things that last, he saved it up. Why? Because he was afraid other people may benefit from his money. And what happens when you're dead? Other people benefit from your money. The thing you tried to stop is what happened. Because he didn't say, God, why have you given me the money? Not that he had to give it all away. Not that he wasn't to invest some for the future. Not that he wasn't to say, we're going to talk about that in another week. But he didn't ask, God, why do I have what I have? And how would that shape your contentment? How would that shape your life? How would that shape your future? How would that shape your conversations at home if you just said, hey, let's talk about why we have what we have? Because the number one thing couples fight about is what? Money. Why do they fight about it? Because they ask the wrong question. Why don't we have enough? And they're afraid to talk about it because one is afraid if they listen to the other that they're not going to have enough. What would happen if you sat down and said, why do I have what I have? What would happen as a teenager if you sat down and said, why do I have what I have? Why do I have the potential and the opportunities, the potential education, the money for school? Why do I have what I have? What does God want me to do with it? What if you sat with your kids and said, hey, kids, this is what God's given us. Why do we have? What are we to do with that? How would that shape us? Because there's something powerful, some joy, some delight that occurs when we give some of that and invest that. Not storing up what treasure for ourselves, where moth and rust destroy and where it's eventually going to be shared with other people, but we invest and build relationships in heaven and store up treasures. Because my guess is because of someone's financial investment in a church, in a camp, in a ministry, you got to see Jesus. That because someone invested their funds a little bit into kingdom kind of endeavors, you got to encounter Jesus. Why do you have what you have? See the lie. The lie always leads us to making foolish financial mistakes is just a little bit more will make me content. Is focusing on the lie of why don't I have enough instead of why do I have what I have? And thirdly, we pierce ourselves because we don't really believe debt is indebtedness. Right? Our culture tries to tell us debt is good. I got a couple of those letters this week. I bet you got a couple of those letters saying, hey, here, you've been approved for a new credit card. And you know what you can have with this new credit card? What kind of life you can have? What kind of freedom you can have? What you will be able to experience with this new credit card. There's one word that's never used in that letter. Do you know what that word is? Debt. It promises all sorts of things, but it never promises that you are going to be a slave to that credit card because you're going to have to pay it off. And if you don't pay it off, if you just say, hey, I'm going to put money on that credit card and buy stuff, but I'm not going to pay it off, someone's going to come to your door. And someone's going to eventually take the rest of your stuff. And every time there's a credit card, it promises joy. I can tell you, how many of you, when your credit card statement comes in the mail, are really excited? How many of you like, woohoo, I got to pay off my credit card today? How many of you still paying off student loans are like, oh boy, I just can't wait to make that payment? How many of you have taken a 60-month car loan for your car and it's now dented and scratched and got 100,000 miles on it? They're like, I'm so excited, I'm paying off my old car. It's debt. It destroys our peace. And yes, there may be times for our house for something significant. Proverbs 13:11 says, dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. You see, we don't live in peace because it just dwindles away instead of seeing our money grow. Right? And there's all sorts of promises. Oh, you don't have to pay for it for 5 years. Right? You don't have to pay very much for it. Just $49 down, pay with money, sticker on the window. You don't even know what that sticker is or how long you're going to do it. Takes away our peace. Right? It also robs us of the ability to be generous. 14% of our income, right, is used for debt retirement. We can't be generous. Proverbs 21:20, the wise have wealth and luxury, but fools do what? Spend whatever they get. We live in the richest country in the world, and yet we act as if we are in the poorest country because we are indebted to other people. The poorest nations, they're indebted. They don't have much. They don't have freedom financially. Why? Because they're indebted. We have so much, and yet we act like we're in the poorest country. When we're in debt, it doesn't trust God. In the Old Testament, David was kind of at a low point in his life and kind of a lazy point. And when everybody else went off to war, he went to the balcony and he looked at a woman named Bathsheba. He took her in, he slept with her, got her pregnant, killed her husband. It was just a mess for the family. Right? Because he thought, what, a little bit more, a little bit would just make me happy. That's going to make me happy. He wasn't content. He wasn't doing what everybody else was doing. She is going to make me content. And it was a giant mess up. Because you have to learn the secret of being content. And God finally comes to him and says, this is what the God of Israel says to you, David. I anointed you, in 2 Samuel 12, king over Israel. I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if this had been too little, what? I would have given you even more. And this is what happens when we want something and we're not content and we don't find our contentment in Jesus and that he is enough. We go out and take something and now we have a new master and God says, hey, if there was more you needed, ask me. What more do you need? What is it you need? And why are you going out and trying to find yourself indebted to something else or someone else instead of saying, hey, God, I'm going to humble myself before you and believe that in this life you're going to give me what I really need and trust you. I'm not going to rebel against you and trust your goodness. See, the problem with debt is that it takes away our peace. It keeps us from being generous. It prevents us from really trusting God because we're saying, I'm going to go ahead and get what I want and I don't care instead of surrendering, and ultimately we have to pay it off. Right? That's the thing. The debt comes. We can live in freedom for maybe a year or two. Oh, no money down or interest free for 5 years, whatever. But eventually that payday comes. That payday comes. The worship team is going to come back and we're going to sing a little bit just about Jesus. But just as I close, I want to read a verse from Isaiah. And Isaiah says this about our stuff. He says, "Why are you spending money on that which is not bread? And why do you spend your labor on that which what? Doesn't satisfy? Why are you spending all this time and energy for what? A happy meal, something that never really satisfies. It may give you a little buzz for a moment, but it never satisfies. Instead, he says, listen to me and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me. Hear me, why? That your soul may live." You see, the world always entices us. The enemy entices us with a happy meal. There's one thing. This will make you happy. This will content. This will give you what you need. This is where you'll find peace. This is where you'll find joy. And the prophet Isaiah says, why are you giving yourself, spending your money and wasting it on that when there is a Savior, Jesus, who wants to give you so much? He alone will satisfy. He will give you everything that you need. He gave his life, surrendered it on a cross. Why? So that you could have freedom, that you could have forgiveness, so the power of his Holy Spirit could come into your life, so that you could know that you have eternity with him, so that everything you need for life and godliness is in him. Why do you sell yourself to some other master for some little hit, a pleasure that you think may satisfy, but it won't, when you can have Jesus? George Bernard Shaw, the playwright, he wrote this. He says, "Money is worth nothing to the person who has enough." If you have enough, if you have something of value, if you have something rich, money, pleasure, anything else, it's nothing. There's no desire for it. And so we're just going to sing a couple songs just about Jesus and him being enough and the delight in who he is. And I just invite you, as you sing these songs, just reflect and remember who you have in Jesus and what he wants to provide. And that godliness, Jesus, with contentment is great gain, great gain. And as we begin to sing, the ushers are going to come and pass the offering baskets. And some of us give online, some of us give electronically, some give once a month. But as the basket is passed, I encourage you, don't just throw it or give it to somebody quickly. Hold it for just a second. And let this just be a very tangible exercise, because it's a symbol, right, of just giving, of generosity. And as the basket goes by, ask yourself, is Jesus enough? Is he enough? And Lord, help me to live a life where Jesus is enough and he satisfies more. Let's pray together. Jesus, just want to thank you that you give us something that eternally satisfies, something that's greater, something that just, it doesn't kind of leave us quickly. Thank you that you give us eternal life. Lord, help us to discover the secret of contentment and to surrendering to you. You give us what we need. Help us to be honest about greed in our life and call it what it is and seek your forgiveness and help. Lord, help us to see what you've entrusted with, not as, why don't I have a little bit more? Why don't I have enough? And as we look at next week, Lord, help us to enjoy what you've given to us. Help us to be able to find satisfaction and richness in it. The ushers are going to come and receive an offering. Just ask yourself, is Jesus enough? And when the basket has been passed by your row, I invite you to stand as we worship him.
Upon this rock I will stand. Upon this rock I will stand. Glory, glory, we have no other King but Jesus, Lord of all. We raise the anthem, our loudest praises ring. We crown Him Lord of all.
the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in my waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in my waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you're good, you're good. Oh, you're good, you're good. Oh, you're good, you're good.
You're never gonna let me down. 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 You're good. Oh, you're good, you're good. Oh, you're good, you're good. Oh, you're good, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down.
Amen. That's the truth today. You can go in that confidence. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining us. Stay up to date with us by liking our Facebook page and following us on Instagram. See you next week.